Thanks, Kathy. All right. So first off, I just want to give a quick thank you to everyone joining us today. We're excited to help kick off the first day of the Stronger Conference and to be with you and have the opportunity to talk with you all about the importance of real-time reporting. My name is Haley Pruitt. I'm the Director of Customer Advisory here at CyberSaint. I joined the company about a year and a half ago after working with Deloitte in their cyber risk practice. Through my experience, I've had the pleasure of working with just about every industry out there, from healthcare to transportation, government, finance, you name it. I've probably had a client in that space. And I've been able to see the types of data that they collect and how they leverage it, whether that's for protection, detection, or response purposes. And I've really been able to see how dashboarding has aided their efforts. So I'm hoping to share some of that with you today. And I've also got Kathy here with me to walk us through some real life examples. Kathy, would you mind giving us a quick intro?
Hello, I'm Kathy Olisnag. I'm the Director of Customer Success at CyberSaint. I joined earlier this year, and before that, I was in sales and customer success at a cybersecurity consulting and managed service provider. And what I learned in those years really made me interested in the CyberStrong platform and how transformative the experience for security consultants and analysts could be, leveraging all that automation, all these integrations, and really allowing the conversation with the leadership team by providing them full access, full transparency, and making them part of the whole risk management conversation. So excited to be here today.
Thanks, Kathy. So to set the stage, I wanted to share a quote that I stumbled upon and tweak just a little bit preparing for this session. And it says, having a cyber risk program without real-time visualizations is like driving a car with no dashboard. So really think about that for a second and break it down. You know, is the dashboard what makes the car go? Obviously not. The car is going to technically run without it. You'll get from point A to point B. But how comfortable and how safe are you going to feel driving without a dashboard? You know, you have no idea where you're going because there's no navigation system. You don't know if you have enough gas to get there because there's no gas meter. You know, you don't know how to diagnose your car when it starts making that strange rattling noise halfway through your trip. So how do you know if you're going the speed limit? How do you know when to speed up, when to slow down, when to fill your tires, change your oil? Without all of those gauges, there's, you know, a really high likelihood that you could end up with a steep ticket, a dead car, or stranded in the middle of nowhere. And I think that you can draw a lot of parallels between driving and risk management, because driving at its core is a constant assessment and reassessment of risk. You know, do you have enough time to cross the intersection before the light turns red? What's the impact if you don't make it? You know, if your gas light's on, can you afford to bypass the next 5 stations in search of the cheapest gas? What happens if you run out of gas along the way? You know, or, you know, are you sober enough to drive home after that 3rd margarita at girls' night? You know, for the record, the answer to that one's always no. Probably safer to just take an Uber, but you get the point, right? The impact of a single misstep while driving could cost you your life or someone else's. So the stakes are high. So it's no surprise that car dashboards were invented to provide drivers with all of the information that they need to safely arrive at their destination and to troubleshoot and mitigate issues along the way. And cyber risk dashboards were invented for a very similar purpose. Dashboards are what make growth possible because they're giving you insight into what's happening across all areas of your business. They can help you answer questions like, should we move to the cloud? Are we prepared to have employees work from home? Should we outsource to this vendor or that vendor? Should we, buy this tool or that tool? You can better predict and prepare for the outcomes of different decisions that you have to make through dashboarding. And without them, coming up with your business strategy is a lot like driving blind or in the dark. You aren't going to know, the level of risk associated with different activities, and you don't know where you're going to need to invest more time, more money, or more effort, or where to pull back because things aren't bringing you the returns that you need. And traditional spreadsheets and individualized reports, they may have been enough a few years ago, but they aren't cutting it anymore. And I want to talk about why on the next slide. So if you've been in the risk space for a while, you probably already know the main pain points of traditional reporting. But if we're going to talk about why dashboards are important, I think we first have to look at the specific problems they're trying to solve. Risk management until more recent years has always been a compliance activity. It's something you had to do to check a box because someone told you you had to. But why was it like this? In my mind, I kind of relate it back to how we all put off cleaning our houses until we plan to have guests over, or why most heads of households aren't going to entrust all the cleaning to their kids. And that all comes down to time, effort, and expertise. When you think about who's preparing these reports, who within the company typically knows the digital landscape best? It's the tech team. Who knows how the tools are configured and what data they each hold? Again, it's the tech team. And who gets blamed when the company gets hacked? The tech team. But when you also think about who typically has the least amount of time because their core responsibilities are so demanding and they're already stretched thin, you guessed it, it's the tech team. So again, it's no surprise that this activity that typically took several weeks or even months of manual effort was completed and performed infrequently. And I think business folks like to lump together all tech people under one umbrella. They view them as one group. But when you think about how vast the digital landscape is, you've got different applications, different servers, different databases, all the things that they're dealing with. Typically, there's a smaller tech team that's responsible for each one of those things. And when you're looking at, where are your vulnerabilities, how protected are the assets that you have, where are your biggest gaps, you have to work with all of those different groups. And that's a huge lift. And when you think about how they're collecting the information from those groups, what is, everyone's go-to cost-effective tool for that? Whether you graduated this century or 3 to 4 centuries ago, the answer is Excel. Potentially if you came from a, larger, well-established corporation, you might have had the luxury or misfortune, depending on how you look at it, of dealing with a legacy GRC tool. But, I think we can all agree those aren't really cost-effective. They take a long time to implement. They're very modular. Every time you want to add on a new functionality, you got to buy a new module, and they're a little bit clunky. So in most cases, what we're dealing with across most organizations is Excel. So what is kind of the whole process of spinning up a report look like? You've got your tech team who is going to be told what framework to work out of. They come up with a full list of questions that they want to ask to assess compliance. They put those into a spreadsheet. They're going to break them out into different tabs. Maybe the different tabs represent different systems, servers, applications, potentially business units, processes, regions, legal entities, whatever demographic they're using. And then within those tabs, they're further breaking down those questions into different topics. They're making a full list of who are all the SMEs that they need to interview. And then they're actually going and do that, meeting with them, asking them those questions, recording their answers, taking screenshots and documenting evidence. If they're really tech savvy, maybe they're writing a little bit of code or embedding formulas to do some calculations in the spreadsheet to give you a numerical value that represents compliance. But when you're looking at all the people that are involved in assessing compliance, this giant spreadsheet is being sent back and forth amongst a lot of different people. What ends up happening is, you end up having to re-interview people because, Susan saved over to the last version of the document. Maybe you have to recode a few things because the file got corrupted after Steve had it. Or you end up in a debate about which version is actually the latest version of the document because, Kyle and Karen started working on the spreadsheet at the same time and then sent it out to their teams. So you now have, 2 documents running in parallel. And, there's a huge manual lift in having to, consolidate and compile all of those results. And you end up with this spreadsheet that has maybe over 20 tabs with each one, acting as a standalone report, offering really no integrated view of cyber risk across the whole organization as a whole. And, because of how much effort that takes, even if there are a couple gaps in there, probably by the end of it, you throw up your hands and say, that's good enough. But even when you send it off to the powers that be, leadership needs to see it. You've maybe got one person from the business side who's emailing back saying, what is this? How do I read this? Which parts are relevant to me? What does this acronym mean? So to save yourself time, maybe you cut out a few tabs and you create a custom version that's specific to that person that you're sending it to. But then somebody else catches wind that you did that, and now they want a specific version just for them so that they can just look at the things that they need. And that goes on until you have, several versions of this document, out there in the wild. And, because of the amount of time that this takes, chances are those teams that are managing the applications that you were assessing, changes have happened to them. Maybe they've been updated and some of those questions that they answered no to are now yeses, and now it needs to be updated. But which document do you update that across? Is it the one that you sent to Claire? Is it the one you sent to Mike? Or is it one that you sent to 10 other people? So it's hard to keep track of that information, and it's outdated the second that report is complete. And when you look at how infrequent this was happening, because it was more of an annual compliance activity, leadership relies on those reports to make their decisions. So what are they supposed to do for the rest of the year when risk isn't being reported on? Are they supposed to save up all their decisions until they have that report? That's not really realistic, because they're making decisions on a daily basis, and they need the most up-to-date information to make sound decisions. So at this point, I've probably got people chuckling because they've experienced this firsthand, or some eye rolling because they still think spreadsheets are the bee's knees. So let's take this a step further and look at what's changed in the market on the next slide, for what's making dashboards a must-have. So the trends that we face in today's business climate show just how full circle things are and how the need for dashboards is constantly being fed. The pandemic alone has been a huge catalyst for the digitization that we see today. Everything had to be brought online so that employees and customers could conduct business from home. And making that a reality involved bringing on new tools and systems. And if you've shopped for a technology platform recently, you know that the vast majority of them are single purpose. They're built to solve a specific need, and that's all they do. So if you want to solve another need, you have to buy another tool. And if you want those two tools to work together, you have to buy a third tool that sits in the middle of them that lets them communicate. So what you end up with is this tool fatigue and data paralysis, because you have all of these disparate systems that aren't communicating with each other, that you can't consolidate all of the information from, and they're pushing out massive amounts of data that you don't know what to do with. And everyone knows that the larger the network, the greater the attack surface. So as companies are gaining new technologies, hackers are developing more sophisticated attacks. With every new attack, stakeholders from regulators to consumers to the board, they're learning, they're becoming more risk aware, more cyber literate. As more attacks happen, regulators come out with new legislation and reporting requirements because they're hoping they can hold companies accountable and encourage better security practices. Even consumers in public media are becoming more vocal. They're only wanting to purchase from companies who prioritize privacy. And because of this, we're seeing information security officers being consulted in more C-suite meetings. They're being asked to deliver performance metrics to a wider range of audiences at a more frequent cadence. Even at the board level, we're seeing greater prioritization of security. Over 40% of boards today actually have a director with cyber expertise. And Gartner predicted that by this year, 50% of large publicly traded companies would have entire board committees specifically dedicated to integrated risk management. So, with that greater knowledge also comes greater skepticism. They're not going to be as trusting of the information that's presented to them because they know better. So the questions coming from the C-suite and the board, they're no longer going to start and stop with, are we secure? They're no longer accepting blanket statements from CISOs around security. So the CISOs have to be able to provide up-to-date, actionable insights, and they can't do that from what static reports provide. They have to be able to seamlessly move between that high-level overview, that kind of elevator pitch of what compliance and risk management looks like, and then dive deep into those granular KPIs when they're asked questions to provide proof of the claims that they're making. So, they're responsible for, looking at historical trends, for being able to demonstrate progress against that, illustrating what the amount of risk is going to be associated with different strategic moves that leadership wants to make. And given the larger audience that they're reporting to now, they have to be able to generate those reports and those visualizations for each of those audiences on the fly, which makes that integration and that single source of truth even more important, because it puts all of that data at their fingertips. So the only way for CISOs to meet these needs is through greater digitization, which kind of brings us back to the beginning, because they need those automated dashboards that integrate the data from all business areas, creating that single source of truth. So we'll move to the next slide. So if I've convinced you and you're wanting to invest in dashboards, what should you expect to get out of them? Dashboards should act as a trusted advisor. They're the unbiased member of the C-suite or the board who's going to provide you with an elevated sense of objectivity when it comes to decision making. By providing direct access to performance metrics, they provide a clearer understanding of the company's overall security posture and their risk exposure. And while each company should be choosing the metrics that it wants to capture based on its individual needs, there's a number of basic goals that your dashboard should be able to help you with. At a more granular level, your dashboard should provide an up-to-date overview of control coverage and performance so you can spot gaps before they become larger threats. It should enable you to, tailor the application of controls to assets based off of their relative risk exposure so that you're not wasting time applying, the highest level of protections to all assets when some of those assets have virtually no risk. You want to be able to aggregate that compliance data, slice it and dice it so that you can understand, not only overall organizational risks, but how cyber risks for certain assets tie back to organizational risks, and how compliance compares across different assets, business units, regions, or whatever demographic of your choosing is. You should be able to model various risk scenarios and be able to articulate the likelihood and impact of each of those so that you can make decisions about where you're going to take your company in the future and what those strategic moves are going to be. You want to know, have a highlight of which assets are most at risk and be able to evaluate whether your remediation efforts are providing the greatest reduction in risk that they can. When you're looking at which strategic initiatives to either continue with or plan for the future, you want to be able to calculate the return on investment of those. So that you can, make your budgeting decisions. Is it worth it to pump more money into that initiative if it's not bringing you the returns that you need? Is it worth it to start a new initiative if it's going to bring in more risk? Having dashboards is going to help you with that. So, above all else, your dashboard needs to be intelligible by the different audiences so that it can inform those decision-making processes, whether that decision is to move to the cloud, contract a new vendor, implement a new tool. Your dashboard should be providing you with that single pane view of all the inputs that you need to safely make that decision and be able to drill down into them. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Kathy to walk us through some use cases and real dashboard examples.
Great, thank you, Haley. So every organization that we work with has a different, there's somewhere across the spectrum of cybersecurity maturity and risk management maturity, but they all have to start somewhere. And that somewhere is to set a baseline and then measure themselves against it. So they would have to perform a security risk assessment. And having a dashboard that allows you to track progress against that effort is very useful for people such as the program manager, the CISO, or the compliance officer. If you start to actually embrace risk assessments across different areas of your organization at a business unit level, or based on critical assets, or based on a threat signature, then you're going to have more and more of these to monitor. So having a dashboard to see how they're progressing, what timelines are being met or not met, who's working on what. And so then you can really start to see the progress, but then also make decisions whether or not you need to reallocate certain resources on things that are not progressing according to schedule. Another also part of something along these lines in this kind of a dashboard is it allows you to kind of see how holistically within this bird's eye view, you're kind of doing well across certain areas and not so well on others. So at a high level, at the beginning at least, you can say, okay, well, we need to kind of refocus our attention on certain areas. So that's one thing. Now, what some of our customers are actually doing is when they're starting to adopt a more automated and integrated platform, such as CyberStrong, they actually are comparing it to the old school way of doing things with spreadsheets. And they're trying to see how these efficiencies are affecting time being used now on more strategic efforts. So they're actually not just looking at time savings within the talent pool, which is a very scarce talent pool in cybersecurity, but also in terms of just the user experience and how they are now appreciating doing their job more since they are now living in a more live environment and it's a little bit more dynamic, collaborative, and so forth. So as an organization matures, they can start to not just do a point-in-time assessment, but they can kind of perform or keep updating that particular assessment, but then also kind of use the technology at hand to slice and dice data in certain categories and to also perform a trend analysis. So the way some organizations are doing that is to kind of see how certain business critical assets are protected, whether they are falling within a specific set of target control sets, or if there are some weaknesses there. But then you can also compare how your business units or certain regions are comparing against one another across the same framework or maybe across the NIST TSF. And again, also the threat landscape is very dynamic, but sometimes within a certain industry, you're more targeted by certain threat actors than others. And so you can kind of do certain analysis on that level as well. So having these dashboards that can kind of see not only a point in time, but then also over time, the trends as your security posture evolves, you can kind of see whether or not a certain investment was a good investment or not. It can also help you decide where the gaps are and where you need to kind of reprioritize certain investments. But also the flip side of that is where the strengths are. Who is doing certain things better than others, and maybe you can learn from them and set that as a new standard and implement new best practices across your organization. So it's not just about looking for the bad stuff, it's also to identify some of the good best practices. And the way it may help to kind of compare one versus another is to reference a common framework, which we use in a CSF for, so that it's easier to compare apples to apples, and then compare it to an internal set of standards as well. And obviously within a particular time frame, whether that's within a year or within a couple of months. So you can kind of look at this data across different time schedules. Haley, was there anything I should add to this?
I don't think so. I think you've covered it all.
All right. So, and then the next step, the next level up in terms of risk management is when you perform all these risk assessments, you can use this data now to start identifying where your weaknesses lie and perform some risk scenario modeling to engage with the leadership team and the business stakeholders to make certain decisions as to, okay, we need to understand what our risk exposure is, not just in terms of likelihood. We know that we have a weakness here, and given the vertical that we operate in, we are more likely to be targeted by this type of threat. And therefore, we need to understand if this were to happen, what is the financial impact that comes with an application going down for a day, a week, a month, so that then you can propose solutions that actually fit within the particular risk posture and the risk appetite of an organization that obviously not an analyst could set, but that the leadership kind of has to provide guidance around. So on one hand, this helps you to kind of look through the lens of specific scenarios as it applies to your organizations and start to prioritize which risks you really need to address the sooner, the better, and how to allocate resources to them. The thing about risk management is it is a continuum. The threat landscape, the technology landscape, as well as your business keeps changing. So for that reason, if anything changes, you have to reevaluate that risk, as you may have to allocate more resources to something over time. But the ultimate goal of having a risk register, going through these exercises and having that open dialogue, is to really get the executive buy-in into this process. And so once you've gone through these risk scenario modeling exercises, you kind of decided, okay, these are our top 5 risks, really. Now let's find some solutions. So collectively, as an organization, you can come together and review some solutions that would address one risk at a time. The important part of a dashboard is that you can kind of visualize side by side, whether it's different vendors providing one particular solution or comparing solutions in light of a defense in-depth strategy, how they would have an impact and reduce the actual risk if you were to proceed with one or a few of them over time. So this is where showing the actual return on security investment may be a useful visual to kind of come to a conclusion and collectively, again, agree to a plan to move forward to address risk, whether it's risk acceptance or risk mitigation, transferring it, or just avoiding it altogether. But this type of a dashboard really enables that conversation. You're not talking bits and bytes anymore. You're talking tangible scenarios as it applies to your business. And you're talking dollars and cents. But I'll let Haley speak a little bit more about how important it is to make it your own.
Yeah. So thanks, Kathy. So to wrap things up, I think what's important to remember is, there are a lot of resources out there that are going to tell you, what kind of metrics you should be capturing or looking out for. And typically these are pretty standard across all organizations, but how you design your dashboard should be unique to, the needs of your stakeholders. If leadership prefers things to, be shown a certain way, cater to that. But make sure that you're able to, rearrange and manipulate the data to kind of satisfy all the different audiences that you need to present to. Your dashboard should be, standalone in that they can speak for themselves. They shouldn't require you to be there to step by step walk, each member of leadership through it. They need to be able to easily and quickly glean the insights that they need to take action from these dashboards. So in the end, remember just to choose what's best for you. And thank you everyone for joining. We can open up for a Q&A now.